What is up, metal fans, Iron Maiden fans? Welcome to new guys who are wanting to check out things about this amazing band and about their vast and distinctive discography and song collection. So, a while back, a lot of guys wrote in to me and asked me that, when it comes to Iron Maiden, they heard many different things, not just about the various singers that they've had, but also about, other members and what started to emerge as the eras. What were the favorite lineups and eras that really stand out the most. So what I thought of doing was to really sort of go through it and just sort of depict as to what are the different eras, what are some of the things that fans like, what are some of the things fans don't like, what stands out a lot, and so on. So without further ado, I just want to dive straight into it. So for guys who are new, this is what I can share with you. And for guys who are longtime Maiden fans, please feel free to chip in. Would love to know what you guys think in the comments below. Here we go. So the first era, and I'm taking studio albums here, not live albums or live recordings. There are a ton of them. Just the studio albums right now. The first thing that you're going to notice is that this is the first one. So you had the debut album, which was Iron Maiden. Now this interestingly had Paul Di'Anno, and he was there on the second album, which you see called Killers. But the thing is, on the first album, you had another guitarist with Dave Murray, whose name was Dennis Stratton. Now he was only on this album, and Adrian Smith, whom we're all more familiar with, he came in on the album Killers. So there are many fans who like this era of Maiden, early Maiden. They felt that the band had already developed their signature sound, they had already put their stamp on the world. It has a very, very devoted fan base that comes along with it. I certainly love this era. I like Di'Anno's voice. I certainly think that the band came up with some killer tunes out here. Personally, between the two, the debut and Killers, I lean a little bit more to the debut, but that's just me. That's my personal opinion. Would love to know what you guys think as well. So, this was a very interesting part of Maiden's career. Now, obviously, this is era one. Let's take this as era one and the main lineup, the two lineups which are here. Obviously, taking into account the two guitarists that could switch. The second era, which is by far considered to be the most classic lineup, the classic era of albums, the most devotion that comes from anywhere in the Iron Maiden fan base, is to what we will call era two. So we just went through era one. This is era two. And era 2 has some phenomenal records, okay? And by that, what I mean is that you have The Number of the Beast, you have Peace of Mind, you have Power Slave, you have Somewhere in Time, which is my personal favorite from this entire era, followed by Power Slave, and the next album, which came after Somewhere in Time, which is Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Now, these albums, these are essentially, quintessentially, these 5 albums are considered to be what constitute the classic lineup, which had where Bruce Dickinson came in on The Number of the Beast. You had Steve Harris obviously on bass, you had Dave Murray, you had Adrian Smith, and you had Nico McBrain on drums. And this was a 5-piece. So just the same as the first era, the second era is what you would actually find is where most fans are drawn to. And this is where usually fans like to start with, getting into the band and so on. In fact, if you guys check out my top 3 records from Maiden, you'll in fact find that there are, a couple of records from here that I've cited in those top 3. So do check that out. I'll leave a link in the description below. The next era is somewhat a bit iffy. It probably receives a little less love, although there are some songs that are much beloved. Case in point, the title track of which was Fear of the Dark. You also have the album before that, which was No Prayer for the Dying. That was actually an album before it was, guys, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, I think before it was actually finished recording or was about to be recorded, Adrian decided to leave the band, and he was then replaced by another guitarist who I will gladly admit I do like a lot and I'm a big fan of, which is Yannick Gers, who's still with the band even till today, and I have a very interesting story to tell about that. But let me break it up into 2 parts. So what I had read a while back was that when Adrian decided to move on and to explore other musical endeavors and so on, and when Yannick was informed that he was going to be the replacement, he was being offered the job, his immediate thought was, where's Adrian? And he immediately found Adrian out. He tried to convince him not to leave and so on, which more than anyone else really impressed Dave Murray. because he said that most guys would say, "Where do I sign up?" Whereas this guy was, trying to keep Adrian in the band. Obviously, Adrian didn't stay. He did join them for what became later released as the Donington live album. For those of you who haven't know what a phenomenal show that is, and I think he comes on the track Running Free towards the end of the concert, and little did all of us know that that would be the definitive lineup that would come later on. So anyway, coming back to this, what we would call as the third era of Maiden, which is No Prayer for the Dying and Fear of the Dark. This is what is sometimes considered to be sort of like a love-hate sort of thing in a way, more love than hate, but still it's kind of a mixed balance like that. I personally like these two albums a lot. I think they have a lot to offer, some really good tracks on there. No Prayer for the Dying, my standout track obviously for me is Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. I know, quite a heavy, maybe some might find repulsive title, but I like it. I think it's a very cool tune and so on. I've heard Bruce Dickinson's solo version of that, but I much prefer the Iron Maiden version of it. That's just my opinion. And what you then had was, after Fear of the Dark came out and the tour was about finished and so on, lo and behold, Bruce Dickinson decides to leave. So he's gone, and Maiden is kind of stuck right now with Steve Harris, Dave Murray, Yannick Cruz, and Nico McBrain wondering what direction they should go in and who should replace him. And that leads into the fourth sort of studio lineup, the fourth era of Maiden, which, to be very honest, most fans hate, absolutely hate this era, which is constituted by the albums The X Factor and Virtual 11. And it's interchangeable, but most fans sort of say between the two they prefer the X Factor, which I personally also prefer. But let me point this out, guys. Virtual 11 does have some good tracks on it. Oh yes, The Klansman, Don't Look to the Eyes of a Stranger, and one gem, I have to point this out, one gem of a track that keeps getting missed out by everyone. Please check it out, which is the closing track of Virtual 11, which is called Como Estás, Amigo. Please listen to that. It was actually a song, if I remember correctly, co-written by Yannick and with Blaze Bailey, who was the singer for these two. And Blaze obviously is not Bruce Dickinson. He certainly also was not Paul Di'Anno. But I think Blaze brought a certain flavor, a certain element there. Now, personally for me, I'm a little more sympathetic. I do like these two albums. I do think that there's a lot to offer. I'm someone who's met many Maiden fans who feel the same way, but I do know a lot of Maiden fans don't like this era, and that is absolutely fine. To each his own, perfectly okay. Now, where the joy and smiles came back on everyone's face is the fifth era, and that is constituted by these albums, which I'll just get to in a sec. Why? Because Bruce Dickinson and Adrian Smith came back into the fold. Now, remember when I said that for the third era there was an interesting story, and I gave you part of it about when Yannick tried to convince Adrian to stay in the band? Well, guess what? When Steve Harris finally spoke with Adrian, as the story goes and as I read, is that Adrian said that I'll come back on one condition: you are not getting rid of Yannick. And it just shows the sense of brotherhood and trust. I mean, just how humble these guys really are. And the fact that they then said, okay, they looked at each other and said, hey, why not? Why not just have three guitarists? Why do we need to just go back to the old formula of two? And Yannick was willing to step down, by the way, for those who are wondering. He was more than willing to do what was best for the band and step away and let Adrian come back, which again, credit to all three of those guys, Dave, Yannick and Adrian. I mean, phenomenal guys, down to earth, the sweetest guys you would have probably ever met. I've had the good fortune of being at events where they were there, and I've seen how well they've treated people. Just top class guys, all of Maiden. I think that's why they're so beloved also, not just for great musicianship and art and everything. They're just really cool people. As such, they haven't lost touch with that human element. So, era number 5. Again, you could say that era number 5 is as loved as the classic era, which is era 2 or maybe even era 1, but I would still say there's a difference. I think most Maiden fans would still hold era 2 to be the definitive period, song-wise, lineup, structure, attitude, concerts and all that, but not a takeaway from era 5. I love era 5. I think it's phenomenal. The one thing you will notice though in era 5 is that, yes, let's address it, the songs started to get very long. It's really long in many cases. In fact, when you start with Brave New World, which by the way guys, this is my favorite Iron Maiden album of all time, Brave New World. Love it, love it, love it. Second to that, Somewhere in Time. And third to that, I love Power Slave. Love all the other albums, but that would sort of be my top three. I have a lot of love for Fear of the Dark as well. I think it's an awesome album. Love the Book of Souls as well. So, in Era 5, you have Brave New World, Dance of Death, A Matter of Life and Death, The Final Frontier, Book of Souls, and now the soon to be released album, which is coming up in September. Do check it out, called Senjutsu, which roughly translated from Japanese means either tactics and strategy, and in some cases means the art of war. So, if you guys remember that book, very ancient book called Sun Tzu's The Art of War, I think it ties in with that. So anyway, we've heard the first single, which is Writing on the Wall. I think it's a great song. It's very much in line with Era 5's style of writing and the length of songs and the build up and the melody and the structure and all that. Whereas if you look at, Eras 1, 2 and 3, it had a much tighter structure to it, much shorter songs, a much more, very, very hard pressed way in which it would go. Not to say that they were not experimenting. Please don't get me wrong on that. Maiden has always experimented with their sound. They've always gone in different directions. They've never stagnated, which is why they're in my top three of all-time favorite bands and all that. I could never live without Iron Maiden, and I just love their musicianship, the way they just diverse, the ways in which they approach lyrics and songwriting and Bruce's vocal style. So glad he's hale and hearty right now. Can't wait to see these guys. I had the good fortune again of even seeing Bruce at a, believe it or not, a bloggers meet a few years ago. Which was wonderful, to get his thoughts on, how you, because as you know, he's a, multi-potentialite, as some guys like to call it, doing different things. So it was wonderful to hear him. But anyway, I digress. This era is often, a very interesting one. Now, I will confess here also, while I did say I love it, there are some parts and some songs and, one or two albums I do get a little bored with. I can listen to it all the way through, and it's again just my humble opinion. It doesn't have to be yours. I know lots of guys who just love every single one of these, but it's the most, I would actually call it the most experimental era of the five. I think if you were to classify it, era 1 was hard, solid, focused. Era 2, which is the classic one, was bringing the right balance of experimentation, metal, melody, lyrics, depth, poetry, whatever you want to call it, in very, very well balanced. It was like, mwah, brilliant. And era 3 was, a little bit more like, drawing back a little bit, more towards, how era 1 was in the start of era 2, just something like that. Whereas era 4 is a very dark era. If you really listen to it, there's, especially on Virtual 11, it's a very dark kind of era that exists in the songwriting and the melody and structure and so on. So, but whereas era 5, really tries to be a lot more exploratory. It tries to go in many different directions and experiment even more, and take the sound in many ways and so on. So, which I really like, and I really am looking forward to this. In fact, I will probably try and share my thoughts. Once Senjutsu is finally out, can't wait for that. And yes, in case anyone is wondering, as I've mentioned before to a few folks, I had the privilege of seeing Maiden live, and a funny story is that, I was right up in front getting crushed literally by the crowd. And, all of a sudden in the middle of that, Bruce stops. I think it was after the song Revelations or something like that. And he looks down and he points. Now, I felt he was pointing to me. Another friend of mine next to me felt he was pointing to him. Go figure. But he just suddenly said, "You there, what's your name?" And I'm yelling at the top of my voice what my name is, but he just couldn't hear it. But anyway, it was just a very cool moment. I mean, one of your rock idols, just sort of acknowledging you and so on. I mean, not to say it validates your existence, but just a very cool thing. I'm sure a lot of you guys would know what I mean. So anyway, guys, I hope that helps. It kind of gives you a sense of, the structure, the lineup, the eras, the flavor of the music, the what to expect and so on. For those of you who are getting new into Maiden, let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think. For those who are hardcore and long-time Maiden fans, let me know if you agree. If you disagree, that's cool too, man. No worries. Would love to know what you guys think as well. I think I've covered pretty much what I want to say. So thanks so much for the guys who requested this. I look forward to talking to all of you soon. You guys take care and rock on.